This month, our Mom to Mom shows are focusing on how to find and fulfill our purpose in mothering at any stage. And March has also been designated as Pregnancy After Loss Awareness Month. So during this episode, we will share the motherhood journeys of two amazing mothers. So stay tuned to hear how they found purpose after their experiences of loss.
Welcome to the American Mother's Mom to Mom podcast, a show that lifts, encourages, supports, and educates mothers to do their best in their awesome responsibility to raise, teach, and champion the rising generation. Join us as we talk to and answer questions from mothers nationwide about the challenges, heartbreaks, joys, and lessons learned from one mother to another.
Hello and welcome to the Mom to Mom podcast with American Mothers. I am your host, Deanne Taylor. Tens of thousands of women have experienced a miscarriage, stillborn birth, or the death of an infant. This is a perfect presentation that is twofold for this month, recognizing Pregnancy After Loss Awareness Month, but more to the point of our theme for March, how these mothers use their experiences to define and refine their motherhood journeys. Today, two mothers will join me who have traveled the road of pregnancy after loss. Last year, we had them on for a two-part series, but this episode will summarize what they learned during their journeys that helped them move forward. My first guest is Julie Cangialosi, who is a wife, mother, nonprofit founder, and best-selling author. She is the proud mother of Landon and Elle and two guardian angels. Julie and her husband James experienced two pregnancy losses, and those experiences inspired them to channel their pain into purpose. Together, they created their nonprofit, Operation Little Angel 101, Hope After Loss, to help couples when they need it most. We're glad to have you with us, Julie.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, especially with March being Pregnancy After Loss Month. It is a perfect time for us to have this conversation. So thank you for having me.
My next guest is Lauralee Hill. She grew up on a sheep farm in rural Idaho, but moved to Utah when she married Jay Hill. Together, they have 5 children for living. When her children were older, Lauralee went back to school and is delighted to be a second grade teacher. She loves watching cooking shows, entertaining, reading, volunteering, doing family history, and trying every flavor at Baskin-Robbins. Welcome, Lauralee.
Thank you so much, Deanne. It's nice to be here.
I've experienced a miscarriage. And when it happened, I just kind of brushed it off. And as we talked about this previously, I had a very emotional couple days.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I think I finally felt it. Even 40 years later, we still deal with this sometimes.
I think it's the really interesting thing about grief. It doesn't matter what the loss may be, even if it's not a miscarriage or early infant loss. But grief has a way of just sneaking up on us in the most interesting times. And it could be, for me, a smell or a look or a sound that gives me that little reminder. And I feel this wave, almost like the ocean coming, and it's just pummels on top of you. And you have to catch your breath for a minute and realize that the feeling of loss never really goes away. It's part of you and your makeup for your life. And when those moments still happen, whether it's 5, 10, 15, or 40 years later, you have to give yourselves some grace and courtesy to take that moment to process those feelings so then you can move forward.
I think that is a very common thing that people who lose loved ones say, I honor this person with my grief. I will never forget them. I will be sad for my whole life. And that's okay. If that's the way that you feel best about honoring somebody that you've loved and lost. For me, That moment came about 7 or 8 months after her death. I said to my husband one day, Jay, I feel guilty. I had a moment of time today where I didn't feel sad or devastated. And I feel really guilty for that because I feel like it means that I forgot her. And he said to me, no, that's healing. When you have a moment that you forget sadness, that's called healing. And that's what that's what our daughter would want for you. She would want you to be joyful when you think about her and feel gratitude and happiness. And he kind of released me from that guilt. And if I had to say, here's the message that I have for every other woman who might be going through something similar, my message would be, when that moment comes for you, you can set any guilt that you feel aside, unless it feels better for you to hold it. But if you want to, you're not dishonoring your loved one by setting your grief aside. You are healing, and it's okay.
I appreciate that. I have, but I didn't know how much it impacted me until we talked. I was thinking back. I don't know if it was, well, it wasn't talked about 40 years ago. It was just, okay, that happens. Get on with your life. And we are more aware now. And I think it's a good thing that we need to support and love and strengthen one another through these experiences.
I hope it is helpful for even just one person, because it was other mothers who had experienced the loss of a child at any stage that came to me and that really buoyed me up. Really, what they did was they gave me hope that life could be really good and beautiful again. And that when that happened, I didn't need to feel guilty, that life was good and beautiful again, that was what my daughter would want for me. And that was a really big deal.
You've brought up such an interesting thing. I was recently asked, like, now we know the statistics are 1 in 4. Has there been an increase of this? And I'm like, I don't think so. I honestly think that my mother's generation, my grandparents' generation, and earlier, no one talked about it. Everyone, as you said, brushed it off. It is something that happened and you moved on from it. There wasn't that time to be able to process and heal, which may be why you're processing it now.
Right.
So to have the ability now to grieve openly and to be able to take away that stigma has really, to me, feels like my life mission. This is what helps me get up in the morning. And I don't know why we had 2 pregnancy losses, losing Charlie and Lena, but to me, it's their legacy now that has given me the strength to be able to help other couples and other moms going through one of the most difficult times in their lives.
Right. I don't know when your loss was during your pregnancy. Mine was like 3 months. I had just barely told my mother, and I just told our children. This was my 6th pregnancy. And so maybe I thought, oh, well, okay, you just go on with life. But you've named those infants of yours. What was the process for you, if you don't mind sharing that?
So we did have both of our losses, and they both actually happened to be within 16 months of one another. We were both in the second trimester. So our first loss, we were ready to do a big trip. So we spent so many years holding off on almost like the what if, like, what if we get pregnant? What if we can't travel then? So we had a lot of trips we wanted to do on our bucket list, but we put everything off. And struggling with infertility is a really hard emotional thing to begin with. So when we finally saw those 2 pink lines, I woke up my husband honestly at 3 in the morning because I just had that feeling. I'm like, I know I'm pregnant. So I literally woke up at 3 in the morning and I woke him up and I'm like, we're pregnant. And he was obviously very excited and then very curious of why He's like, what time is it? Now I'm wide awake. So we had what we thought was a very dream first trimester. We saw his heartbeat multiple times. We had a trip planned and we had the all clear to be able to go. And it was to Bora Bora, which is in French Polynesia. And our doctor said, you're fine. We saw the heartbeat another time the day before we left. We felt super confident about going. And it was in the middle of the trip that all of a sudden I just didn't feel right. Something is wrong. And my husband said, I think we're fine. I talked to my medical team. They're like, I think you're okay. But if you want to go see somebody, go ahead. So I went to the one hospital on the island because it's pretty remote. And I will say my high school French is not that great. So we already had a little bit of a language barrier. And when they did the ultrasound, that's when we ultimately found out that our baby has passed. And for me, I often call it's like that Charlie Brown teacher moment. All I could hear him say was, wah, 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 wah. I couldn't hear anything after he said our baby has passed. But I still remember his wrinkly lab coat. I remember where things were in the clinic. And I remember fiercely my husband, James, holding my hand so tight and seeing his face when we heard the news, because you're right, he was hurting just as much as I was, and I was in shock. And I was in that mode of shutting down, and my husband went into that mode of, what do we need to do? He just cared about my health and well-being and how do we get home. And unfortunately, after you have a loss in a miscarriage and you can't travel, you can't go on an airplane because there's a risk of hemorrhage. So we had to stay. I wanted nothing but to go home and see my doctor and honestly see my mama. And we had to wait almost a week. And it was terrifying and devastating. And I felt super isolated and alone. And it's crazy knowing the statistics, right? Not only the 1 in 4, but 23 million couples a year hearing that news each year. But I felt lost. I had no resources. I couldn't find anything that really resonated with me at the time. We healed together as a couple. We got the all clear to be able to try again. And unfortunately, that's when we lost our second child, Lena, in around the same time frame in that second trimester. And then I was completely lost, right? I didn't understand why it was happening because I was like, what's wrong with me? Am I not enough? I spend my whole life trying to live this healthy lifestyle, being mindful of everything. And now what's wrong with me? And that's a really hard thing, right?
Right,
Women are
right.
so strong. Look at you, like powerful woman. Like you do everything. You run your household, you have your businesses and you do everything else. So then when you find out you can't do something that you think your body's just supposed to do naturally, it hurts and it hurts hard. And I went into a different mode this time because I couldn't find any resources. So I just started looking up and I became this research machine. And I started finding other avenues that were healthy ways to grief and to have grief and cope. And I started journaling. I started coloring with adult coloring books because it would take my mind away from things.
Thank you for sharing that.
We have been talking about neonatal pregnancy loss and also stillborn and loss shortly after pregnancy. Lauralee, would you mind sharing your story with us? I think it's very tender and will be helpful for a lot of the mothers out there.
So my story is that my husband and I had been married for just over 3 years, and for a while we had been ready to start our journey as parents, but we weren't having any success in the beginning of that journey. And so we had gone to our first appointment with a fertility specialist, and shortly after that first appointment, we learned that we were pregnant, which was very, very exciting. We hadn't begun any of the treatments yet, so I don't know very much about infertility and the struggles of my fellow mothers with regard to infertility, but I have a tiny taste. Anyway, we were just really thrilled. About a week and a half before our due date, I had a baby shower that was thrown by friends. And after the baby shower, I came home with all the cute little things, and I pulled out the baby book that we had bought for our daughter, and I started writing in it. I wanted to write the gifts that I'd gotten. And then I thought, well, I'll just keep writing. And I started to write on the pedigree chart. And I wrote my side, my parents, my grandparents, my siblings, other things that I was filling in. And then I started to fill it in on my husband's side, and I started to realize, wow, my husband has lost his brother and his father to premature death. He had lost all of his grandparents but one. He was 28 at this time. That's a lot of people to lose that you love. And I said to him, we were in the kitchen together, and I looked up from the baby book and I said, do you know, the only thing I'm more afraid of than childbirth is death. And then within a week, I experienced both of those things at the same time. And I actually came away from that experience not fearing anymore, which seems counterintuitive. Like it seems like you would maybe fear more. But I think because of all that preparation I had done just to try to trust God, I think I was just in a really good place spiritually. And so the way that we found out was we went for just a routine doctor's appointment. We had gone to the zoo the day before. I remembered feeling her move inside of me during the time that we were at the zoo. Then we came home. I was really tired. We went to bed, got up the next morning and went in for that appointment. We really liked our doctor. We were joking around. He got out that, the little stethoscope, and he started to grow sober as he moved it around and didn't find a heartbeat. And then he put it away. And then he said to us, I'm really concerned because I don't find any heartbeat. We went in and had an ultrasound, and it was confirmed that our daughter had died. And we didn't know the reason at that point. We later learned that it had been one of those rare umbilical cord accidents where it had just been wrapped around her neck, and we lost her due to that accident.
Thank you, Lauralee. What a special story. You also had a very difficult journey, and we appreciate that you shared it with us. I am sure that our listeners have had so many questions about how you coped with the loss and moved forward with your lives. This is part of our journey during the podcast. But we need to remember the fathers and how this impacts them. I'm afraid that many times the men are considered bystanders during the healing process, but this loss impacts them just as much as anyone. Julie, how did you and James handle it?
For James, I think what was interesting, and in my opinion, because he's not here to be able to speak for himself, but with our first loss being out of the country, I don't think he processed anything until we were on the plane ride home, because he literally was in that fight and flight mode. He just kept going, going, going. And I think when we finally sat on that plane was that moment that he was finally processing everything that happened. So his grieving process, and I think whether you're in the country or out of the country, tends to be a little bit more delayed because the primary concern is for the mom. I would find other ways to be able to cope together. We would find new activities to do, James and I, so we could have new memories and try to rebuild, because after a loss, and especially after two losses back to back, and it was our first two pregnancies, there's a high rate for depression, and totally understandable. But there's also a super high rate of divorce or separation, because it puts an incredible amount of stress and strain on a marriage. And I have to say, my husband has been my biggest rock even before this, but during that moment and still to today, he's been incredible. And I would not honestly have been able to get through any of that without him.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Lauralee, how did Jay respond to the news from the doctor?
Besides that initial journey toward faith and trust in God, then there was like the second leg of the journey with regard to faith and trust in God. But the way that second part began was so beautiful. We checked into the hospital, called our parents with a lot of tears. And after that phone call, we were alone in the room for the first time. It had been about 2 hours since we'd learned that our baby had died. Jay had a major outburst of crying in the doctor's office at the ultrasound when they revealed that she had gone. But I had been as cold as ice. I felt like all the feeling drained out of me. And then we kind of flopped, and he grew calm and I started crying uncontrollably. So now we're at a stage where we were both kind of calm, but still very sad. And he said, we should say a prayer. And I said, okay, but you might need to say it because I don't know if I can speak out loud about this without like bursting into tears. And he did say a prayer, and it was so beautiful. And he did cry a lot. But he said in the prayer, he just said, Heavenly Father, we are so sad. We are devastated, but we trust you and we give her back. And we're just asking that you give us the strength that we need to be able to pass through this grief. And I remember thinking, wow, I agree with everything he just said because he had so much experience with death. I just really trusted those words. And as he was concluding that prayer, what I felt was an incredible rush of power and peace and strength. And what I felt in that moment was the presence of my daughter, my unborn daughter, but my now not living daughter anymore. I just felt her come into that room like an angel of comfort. And as years have gone by, when I look back on that moment, I feel like God has revealed to me that she was there.
It sounds like you both needed to work together with your husbands to get through the grief and to move forward. This is a great testament to your relationships, the love and the support you have for each other. Julie?
You said you did a lot of research. You couldn't find the information that you wanted. And I'm sure that moved you forward to do something else to help others.
It's part of my makeup to want to just naturally give back. When we were going through our losses, I felt like that was my happy place. And I worked with various different charities, many that I still work with today. But once our family was complete, I really wanted to serve couples who were just like us, those that have experienced that loss or those who may have had a stillbirth or early infant loss, and give them the resources that they needed or they need that I wish I had. And that's when we founded our nonprofit, Operation Little Angel 101 Hope After Loss. And we not only have information out there, but more importantly, we provide cuddle boxes. And these cuddle boxes are actual tangible tools that couples can use. I think the most important thing after a loss is that people want to be seen and heard. And when you acknowledge it, you're able to start that process of healing.
Right. I've had several friends who've had stillbirths, and it is devastating. And also SIDS, loss is devastating no matter what time it comes to a parent. There's a lot of things that people say trying to be comforting, but you just say, I love you and I'm sorry for your loss. I mean, what else can you say that's better than that? You're there
There's
for
nothing
them.
else better that you can say. And I heard a lot of crazy things after our losses. It was that moment where you're able to channel your own grace, right? Because it wasn't about you, it was them. It's usually other people feeling uncomfortable and not knowing what to say. They want to help and they think they're being helpful. Sometimes people want to give so much advice because they want to help, right? Especially in society of women, we're like, we want to help and fix everything. But at that moment, you can't.
That is really critical that we remember that part.
Lauralee, what type of support was most helpful for you after your experience?
That is a great question. Lovely, lovely people gave us books. They gave us books written by doctors, psychiatrists, professors, and I was grateful. But what I wanted more than anything was for somebody that had actually lived through it to tell me and to show me that I would be okay again, and that my life and my life with my husband and with my future family could be happy and beautiful. And that's where other mothers came in. All of these other mothers came in. I looked at them over time, over a period of time, and I thought, wow, she's happy. She's not grieving. Her life seems rich, not without challenge, but their lives seemed blessed. And that
And
also gave me a lot of courage.
and they had additional children too, probably at that point.
Yeah.
So you knew
Mhm.
that there was children beyond the stillborn experience that you had
Yeah. Yeah.
that gave
Yeah.
hope.
That's totally true. I think a lot of times you're really sensitive if you've lost a child. You're
Mhm.
sensitive to the idea that another child could be born and that they would ever take the place of the child that you lost. And they don't. But there is truth to the fact that if you're blessed to have another child or to have other children when you to already have other children when you lose a baby or to have children after the loss of a baby, they bring some very special gifts and they're their own unique gifts, but they are
Right.
healing gifts. That is really beautiful too. It is really amazing to see other children in your life that are healers. Mhm.
Well, I like that you have been open with your subsequent children about their sister who
Yeah.
is no longer physically in your family. And I think it's a very powerful and positive thing, and it helps them for their future experiences.
Thank you to Julie Cangialosi and Lauralee Hill for joining me on the American Mothers Mom to Mom podcast during the month of pregnancy after loss.
Be sure to review the show notes to find some good resources and a link to Operation Little Angel 101. The month of March is Pregnancy After Loss Month. During this episode, we talked about neonatal pregnancy loss and having a stillborn child, the impact on the parents, and how they dealt with that, as well as with the grief.
Please remember to reach out to those who have experienced loss and extend to them your support. And to those who have experienced a loss, please give yourself grace and embrace the love and support of others. Thank you for being with us.
Next Tuesday, we have another exciting mom to mom speaker presenting live on American Mothers Incorporated Facebook page. Ashley Stratton asked this question: do you have a goal or a dream you want to accomplish while being a mother, but self-doubt, fear, or the imposter syndromes creep in? After interviewing over 100 women entrepreneurs who were all mothers, Ms. Stratton found 3 key steps to break through fear to accomplish your goals. Whatever your goals are, she can address your fears and help you achieve them. After listening to Ms. Stratton, you will leave with your goal in hand and a new way forward. So this will be the Facebook live presentation on March 25th on the American Mothers Inc. Facebook page. If you are listening to the podcast after that date, visit the AmericanMothers.org website and find the broadcast under Mom to Mom. Check the show notes for more information. The 89th Annual American Mothers National Convention will soon be here, Thursday, April 25th through Saturday, April 27th, 2024, in Omaha, Nebraska. You must register by April 15th so we can plan for you. The theme is motherhood's magical moments. And I know we've all had some of those. We will hear from each state mother of the year as she shares some of her thoughts. And we will also learn from some amazing speakers on a variety of topics that have been requested. The best part of the convention is meeting new mothers and making new friends and renewing long-time relationships. We encourage you to be with us. It'll be an exciting 3 days. We hope you can join us. AmericanMothers.org and click on National Convention. You'll find all the information, be able to register right there and check on room reservations.
Thank Thanks so much for listening to today's show. If you like what you heard, subscribe so you can get your weekly dose of mom-to-mom encouragement. We understand that being a mother can be overwhelming, but we hope that you found something useful you can apply to your own life. We invite you to share this episode with a friend who might also enjoy the message. The mission of American Mothers is to support mothers, empowering them to positively impact their families and communities. We want each one of you to discover and share your innate, inherent, and natural abilities to bless your children and others.
The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the American Mothers Mom to Mom podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of American Mothers Incorporated, its members, or employees. AMI is not responsible for, nor does it verify the accuracy of the information contained in the podcast, nor does the series constitute any professional advice or services. We look forward to visiting with you, one mom to another. Until then, just do your best at mothering, and remember, you're not alone. You've got an army of mothers all around you cheering you on.